Thank you, Pauline. So I'm really excited to be able to welcome Chris, aka Gungnir Godpost, to our presentation. I'm really excited that he was open to being here with us today also and talking about the work that he does and sort of what called him into creating the Godpost that he does. But I will let him speak for himself, but I do want to say that he's got a lot of admirers in the Heathen community, I think worldwide. And I'm sure that many of the people in Heathen Women United and beyond, you know, we really appreciate and value the work that he does. And I'm really looking forward to being able to hear him talk about the work that he does and how he was called to do this for everybody. So Chris, if you are here, you are on.
I am here. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm outside. We normally live in a blissfully peaceful and quiet neighborhood. Today, somebody has been up and down our road in something that sounds like a tank. So I do apologize for any background noise that we may encounter. Anyway, on with the show. I'm not a big planner. I kind of wanted to do this off the cuff, really. So it's going to be just a bit of a sort of informal talk about how I started doing what I do and kind of where it's going, really. So I guess for me, and probably like a lot of you, I've always felt just a little bit different in nature. When I'm in forests, when I'm near the sea, I feel different than I do anywhere else. There's a calm that comes over me, and the mind just goes somewhere else. It's like changing channel on the TV, if you like. And ever since I was a child, I had that feeling, but never really put it into any sort of context. And I guess it was probably in my teenage years when I started to read mythology and explore a little bit of my cultural background and my belonging and that kind of thing. And those feelings started to equate with some of what I was reading. I could see personalities in trees and in the things I felt. Yew trees, the darkness and the coolness felt like Odin. The big, strong oak trees were like Thor. And all of a sudden, something just dropped. So yeah, this is it. This is what these stories mean. These stories relate to our natural world and had some meaning for people. They're not just stories. So that kind of then fired my creative imagination. I've always been a creator. Even as a child, I would draw monsters, dragons, all kinds of things. And I would draw and I would paint mythological figures and characters that over time began to take on a kind of blocky and chiseled kind of look. But I was always a drawer, a 2D artist, until one day, about 10 years ago, I was in my garage clearing things out, and I found just a small piece of timber on the floor. And I just looked at it, and I had the impulse that wouldn't it be cool to try and turn one of those blocky chiseled characters into something 3D. And here he is. So that's my very first piece I ever did, this little Thor. Took me a few days to do with a very basic knife. And I posted a few pictures of him on social media, so that I just made this, I'm quite happy with it. And a few friends said, wow, that's really cool. Could you make me one? So I made a few more, and they posted pictures, and their friends then contacted me. So I did a few more. And so it went on. So that's kind of how Gungnir Godpost started, really. It was, from a creative impulse, but just fired by something that's always been within me. Hello, got some background noise there. Oh, can everyone still hear me?
Okay, I think I muted her. She didn't realize she was unmuted. Go ahead.
That's fine. Yeah, so a carving happened, almost by accident, but it's something that's always been within me. That connection with nature that then extrapolated itself into a relationship with the gods. My approach has always been a intuitive one. Whenever I carve a god, I immerse myself in their story. A lot of the stories, most of us now are very familiar with the stories of Odin and Thor and those characters and what they represent. So I will really, every time, immerse myself in their story and who they are and what it is that they mean and what they symbolize. So with Odin, he is a complex character. He's a contradiction within himself, isn't he? I mean, he's a wise poet, wordsmith, and healer, a trickster, and a bloodthirsty warmonger. The real classic sort of duality of man. So he's always a really good one to carve. But he can take you into some quite sort of dark places emotionally. My carving has always been very freehand. I don't sketch an awful lot anymore. When I started out in my first few, I did, but I can see what I'm going to do within the timber now. It's a much more intuitive thing. I don't sketch anything. I don't measure anything. Everything I do is purely through the connection with the gods and with the timber, which is a big part of it too. The characteristics within the wood you use will allow you to do certain things, and they won't allow you to do others. And that's something that you learn over time. And it's that compromise. There's almost like an internal monologue going on with the timber whilst you're working, about the knots and the twists and the turns and what it will and won't let you do, which is all part of the process too. So that's kind of how I started. I did a lot of Odins, a lot of Thors, and a lot of Freyas. But as time went on, I started to encounter more unfamiliar gods. People would come to me with characters I didn't know, and that was really rewarding in itself, because it then encouraged me to explore those characters. I might know a little bit about Skadi from her story, but again, adopting that approach of empathy and really getting to know and understand that the characters is it's really revealing, not only about the characters, but you find out a lot about yourself as well in doing that, I think. And I'm going to use Skadi as the example, because she's the one that really stands out in my mind as a god that I didn't really know much about. She's kind of a bit of a background character, but the first time I started to carve her and to really empathize with her story, it became quite apparent that she's so much more and related to personal life experience and my experience of a relationship with some of the women in my life. So Skadi, if you're familiar with her story, her father was killed by the gods, and she demanded justice. She wasn't going to be intimidated or pushed around by the gods. So she demanded a marriage, and then there was some trickery that took place where she was allowed to choose her husband by their feet. I still don't quite get the symbolism behind that. I'm sure there's some meaning in there somewhere. And she ended up in this marriage with Njord that was doomed to fail. But her story really kind of made me put myself in her shoes, if you like, and think of her in terms of who she is, and that she's a really self-reliant and independent character. She's, sort of a woman of our times, if you like. She's the goddess of winter and the mountains and the snow. She uses skis to cover the rugged landscape. She uses a bow for self-sustenance. She doesn't rely on or need anybody else. And suddenly this very minor character who was in the background that I didn't know very much about became one of my absolute favorites. She was a character that I really had quite a lot of respect and regard for. And there's a funny story in carving that first piece. When I finished it and I set it down to take a photograph, it was a fairly grey and overcast day. But the minute I snapped the photo, it's this almighty hailstorm just erupted out of the sky and just showered the place in pellets of ice, and it was gone as quickly as it started. And if ever there was sort of magic in the world, that was one of those moments that was just like, wow. It was, it was really quite special. So she's always remained a favourite of mine. And so it goes on every time a new and unfamiliar god crosses my path. I've had my perceptions challenged around Loki. Here's another one. My initial understandings of Loki were probably quite basic. He's the bad guy in the story. and I know quite a few people are quite fond of Loki. He's a very complex and misunderstood character. He's the outcast. He's the misfit. He's the one who kind of wants to fit in but doesn't, and his behaviour and his antics are kind of driven by that. And again, I could relate that to life experiences in my time. I've worked with prisoners and with ex-offenders, and in talking to some of those people, I can see so much of them within him, and it's just very relatable. He became a very relatable character, and one that I've got a lot of empathy and respect for, I guess. In a way, he's a product of his environment, and he is who he is. He's not just the bad guy. Yeah, really interesting character. So it's been evident to me over time that I've got more from doing this than I ever thought that I would. It's more than just carving statues. It's more than just a guy with a beard and a hammer. It's everything that they represent. It's everything that they would have meant to the people of the time. It's how they relate to our world now, what they symbolize, and how they relate to me personally as well. And that kind of brings me on to talking about the sort of as a tool for meditation and reflection. I think when I did my first one, it was probably just a cool little decoration. But again, as time has gone on and there's been more emotion invested and spiritual energy that has come from this process, they've become so much more. So you can just about see my little collection that I've got here, and I'll quite often sit out here for morning or evening with them, and I will just ponder the day's issues, the day's events, the day's problems, and invariably one of them will stick out. One of them, there will be a spark in the eye, or just the way they're angled, almost as if they're talking to another one. The other day it was Frigg, and she was turned slightly into Odin, like she was talking to him, and this was after I'd had a fairly good conversation with my wife. And it's those little things that subconscious picks up on, that then makes you connect, and what that God represents to you in that moment has a message for you. It's kind of like runes and tarot cards, but in a different way. Your subconscious will find the one that has the message for you. It's not magic, it's psychology. Your mind will search and find the one, and will give you the answer or the message that not necessarily you want, but the right message. And that's that has been really unexpected, fascinating, and fulfilling for me, really. I've been absolutely staggered by the journey, from carving my first piece to having over 10,000 social media followers and sending pieces all over the world now. It's phenomenal. It's an absolute joy. It's what I love doing. In the future, I plan to do this full time. This will be the way that I provide for the family. Materially, we're not quite there yet. That's something that's still in the pipeline. So I do it alongside a busy day job and playing my part as a parent within the family. But I'm very conscious that it needs to be balanced. It can't ever become a material venture for me. The minute there's pressure to pay bills, etc., then the magic is gone and it's kind of dead. So I'd rather take my time, pace it, continue to do a day job that does what it needs to do, and to use my spare time to do this thing that I love in the time that I have to do it, and can give it the love and the respect that it deserves, really. So it's been an incredible journey, and it will continue to be an incredible journey. I've made friends all over the world. I've heard some really humbling stories from people about what these pieces mean to them, how they fit into their lives. It's incredible. I can't think of anything better or more fulfilling to be doing, really. it's an absolute joy. And that's kind of it, really. That's kind of, I mean, do you guys have questions?
We do
I'm
have
just
some questions, yeah, in the chat box. I'm going to read them to you in the order that they were written. So Marissa asks, well, she says, these are amazing. Does the wood matter? Do you have a way of relating to the wood that you choose for the sculptures?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it does. If I've got a particular piece in mind, or someone has come with me with a particular message, and it's for an Odin or something, it's like, that has got to be a piece of you. Very often I will use what's available to me here, and some woods are nicer to carve than others. We have a lovely willow tree going in our garden here. It's gorgeous wood to carve, and it needs to be actively forested every couple of years. So I've generally got a good supply of willow, and I use a lot of pine, because it's sometimes it's shop bought, it's sustainably produced, and again, it's just a nice, easy wood to work with. It helps me to keep my costing down. More exotic timbers can be quite expensive, and I'm just very conscious that in this world where things are ever more expensive, I don't want anyone to ever not be able to afford something that I produce. So keeping costs down is key for me. And pine is a lovely wood. It smells fantastic when you cut it as well.
Yeah, and then let's see, Andrea says, just makes a comment that Scotty speaks to her deeply as well. Alam says, what is the process spiritually, emotionally, physically when you approach the start of a new piece?
Yeah, it's always that thing of just having them in mind, and the longer I've done it, the more familiar with them I've become. So that the minute I say Odin or Thor in my head, my mind has just gone there straight away. I know who they are, like members of my own, like I know members of my own family. I know who they are, and I know what they mean to me. So I would just go into that place, and bring up my personal experiences of them that will then go into what I create. I hope that makes sense. I'm slightly conscious that creative minds don't always work like other people's minds, and I don't know if that sounds pretentious or not, but sometimes I try and explain things to people and they're just looking at me blankly. It's like, you haven't understood a word of what I just said, have you? I guess things get expressed better in wood than they do in words sometimes. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure I don't just speak for myself when I say that. I mean, Pauline's here and can probably speak to this too. When I had the joy of being able to get one of your little Odin pendant pieces, which is a very special place on my altar space, I was not expecting, when I opened the package, to feel immediately, I don't know how to describe it, but I got chills. I could feel that it was alive in a way that I don't usually experience. It wasn't just an object. And so I think that whatever your process is, you do imbue that in the pieces that you're creating.
I love hearing that, and it's something that I hear a lot, and it just means masses to me, because that is what I put into them. It is, it's more than just a piece of wood with some paint. It's it's something from inside that goes into it, but you never know if the person on the other end is going to feel that or not. So when I hear that, that is, it really does, mean an immense amount to me that people get that. And I gave a piece to a friend of mine the other day, a guy that I've made some knives with recently. He knows nothing about Norse gods or anything like that. Just as a gift, I gave him an Odin pendant, and he held it in his hand, and he sat down, and he was wiping tears off his face. He said, I don't know how to explain it. There's just something about this that,
Mm-hmm.
And that was, it was quite a staggering moment, because like I say, I do put a lot of myself into what I create. So to see that is received as well is really, fulfilling.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm sure it has had that impact on so many people. Gabriella asks, has your process changed over time? Doing it repeatedly and for other people, I suppose, is different from making a one for yourself.
Yeah, oh, for sure it has. I mean, that this first piece I did with just a really basic knife, and it's actually turned out pretty well, to be honest. But I took a long time over him. I took probably a good few days, probably a week to create him. And the way things are now, that it's so popular, that just isn't sustainable. I couldn't possibly do that. I'll be churning out, probably 4 or 5 a year. So things have changed slightly. Anything you do, the more you do it, you get better at it, you get quicker. For a long while, I resisted power tools. I thought, it needs to be handmade, it needs that energy, it needs that power. And I thought, no, it doesn't. Our ancestors were progressive. They embraced technology. They really used technology, and they did. They invented new things to make things faster, more efficient. And the energy is still there. Instead of a blade stroke, it's a spinning wheel, but it's still my hand, which is connected to my brain and my heart, that puts it in there. So it's just the method of delivery is different, but where it's coming from is the same.
Anna asks, what is your opinion about the fact that Odin and Loki could be seen as two sides of one coin? Because of their connection, there's some similarities and differences.
Yeah, I really like that relationship between them. Like I say, Odin is a deep and complex character. I know that there are some theories that he is the amalgamation of lots of different gods and actual real people, kings and tribal chiefs, etc. over years have amalgamated into this character, which may well be the case, and it's kind of cool, really. It doesn't make him any less real. But yeah, I love the relationship between those two, and quite often when I've got them lined up in front of me, I can almost imagine Frigg kind of nodding, shaking her head disapprovingly about whatever those two might be up to next. It's like he's the bad influence. He's the friend she doesn't really want the husband to hang around with, but he's always there.
Pauline has her hand raised.
Hi, Chris. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, you too.
So obviously I'm privileged to be able to have a few of your different creations. I've got a couple of small pendants. I've got a couple of larger wood posts made from the lovely willow, yes, and a couple of driftwood pieces that you've done, smaller ones, one Ran and a gear. So I mean, obviously I can feel the difference in the wood, as well as the energy of the personality that you put into them. Now,
that's really good to hear. Again, that that comes across. They're not all the same. I don't do them on a template. There are certain features that are the same. My male gods tend to have these very sort of strong cheekbones and deep set eyes, but that kind of evolved from the style of drawing that triggered it all, really. My feminine character tend to have softer features, so it's a different kind of carving. It's a different approach. The male characters, it tends to be a much more forceful and physical approach, where with the feminine characters it tends to be softer and more gentle with the timber.
The question I have related to this is, when you end up creating something and that person comes back, like me, as I say, I've got that privilege of a few pieces already, and I'm on the list for another one, and I know it's probably going to be a year down the line, probably more, which I'm absolutely fine with. It'll come when it comes. But does that connection that you've made with the individual receiving it sometimes build into these things as well?
Yeah, it absolutely does, especially if it is someone like yourself who I've done multiple pieces for. There are a few people like that. There are some people who I know a bit about their family story and why they're asking for certain pieces, and that definitely feeds into what I create. And the more I get to know about a person, sometimes some of their what I know about them will feed into it. The way I would create thought for one person might be different to the way I would create him for someone else, based on what I know about that person.
Thank you. There's an awful lot about relationships with things weaving into this conference to me, and this is, yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
So Karina says that your work is so beautiful. I don't want to paraphrase, so I'm going to tell you exactly what she said. Gabriella says, thank you. I'm a jeweler with former resistance to power tools. So it makes perfect sense what you said when you were talking about your experience with power tools. Karina says, do you ever start with green wood, things that have fallen in storms or been cut down by others? I think it might be easier to work with, or do you only start with fully seasoned wood?
Yeah, no, I'll start with green wood too. I would go and walk in our local woodland with the dog, and sometimes something lying on the ground will just shout at me to pick it up, or I will see something in it straight away. I will just see a godpost in it, and so I've got to have that. And quite often that's green wood. Our local woodland is forested by a local volunteer group, so they're always cutting stuff down. Lots of hazel and fruit trees, ash, and again willow. So there's a ready supply of both seasoned and green wood locally, and yeah, I'll use both. Good question.
Do you have a preference? Is one easier than the other to work with, or it just completely depends on the tree?
Yeah, I'm not sure I do, to be honest. I think I just I just love what I do, and it doesn't really matter what the wood is. So, you know, I think I've only done a couple of pieces with oak, and I sort of regretted starting with those because that was quite heavy going, pre-power tools. But no, I'm not sure I do have a preference. I really like willow. Willow is a lovely wood to work with, and it's got a personal connection because it grows in my garden. So yeah, if I was going to say one, possibly willow.
And Iswold asks what we mean by greenwood. Is that newly fallen branches or humans cutting down trees and branches?
Yeah, so either fallen or, like I say, where our local woodland is, it's regularly forested for the benefit of the woodland by a volunteer group. So there will quite often be piles of stuff that they've cut down for new stuff to grow. And I will just go shopping, as I call it, and help myself towards there.
Petros says, greetings from Greece. So you have somebody from Greece in here listening to you today. And I had a question too about, so you recently are partnering with somebody who is a knife maker, and you've been carving knife blade, not the blades, obviously, but the handles in a variety of different woods. And I was seeing the post on Instagram, and I was wondering to myself, because the wood has already been chosen, so you have to work with the handle that you're given, essentially. And there are so many different kinds of wood, and I was wondering what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, so that's been quite interesting. We met purely by chance. So there's a local shop in the town near where I live called Godalming. I know the people in that shop quite well. I was chatting to them one day and I saw these gorgeous knives counter, and I said, wow, those are fantastic. Who makes those? And they told me his story. He'd recently quit his day job, which is the sort of kind of thoughts that I've been having recently, to go and do this. So I thought, wow, I need to speak to this guy. So we met for coffee and arranged that I would go to his workshop, and I showed him some of what I do. And just there, and he said, let's do one. Let's do one together. And he produced a knife, and I cut the handle, and we were both really, really pleased with it. So we decided to do a few more. It is different because, like you say, the wood is already chosen. It's all stabilized wood, so it's injected with like a resin, which makes it more durable, waterproof, and all that kind of thing for use in kitchens and all that sort of stuff. But the dimensions, because he quite often cuts them on like an octagonal sort of grip, so I have to work with those surfaces, and it really works with my more masculine pieces because the straight lines and the angles and the clean cuts are all there. I did my first Freya a little while ago, and it was more work to fit her into those dimensions, but yeah, it worked. I wouldn't try and do something that I didn't think was going to work. So that was probably the first time I sketched anything in a long time, just to make sure that I was going to get it right. But yeah, those are working out really nicely. I think I've got another 5 to do at the moment.
Well, talking about different wood types, you have created some pieces out of driftwood. Is that true?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Ran is probably my all-time favorite. There's just something about the sea. I live about an hour from the coast. I would live closer if I could, but I don't. But there's just something that the sea does. I just love to be near the sea, and she is just she's my absolute favorite. It's a driftwood piece I did for myself, having done several others for other people. It was high time I had one. I absolutely love working with driftwood, and it's always so different. This was quite a hard, smooth piece, and sometimes you get the real rough, quite soft pieces, and it's just learning to work with it a different way each time.
And you do have, as you were talking about Ron, a special relationship with her, and I know you've talked in social media about and in Patreon too about your experiences, the relationship and the exchange that you have with her when you go to the ocean. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, always. I'll always give her something. She's one who I absolutely love her, but she absolutely terrifies me too. Just because of the sheer merciless power of the sea. It's overwhelming. It's vast. It's beautiful, but it could just swallow you like that, and you would be gone. And I think a lot of that relationship goes back to our seafaring ancestors, and they would have plied her with gifts to give them safe passage. At a time when they relied on the sea for good fortune, for commerce and travel, and would really sort of be reliant on self, on safe passage. Getting on a boat back then was a much less safe experience than perhaps it is now. You never quite knew which way it was going to go. So yeah, I'll take her a gift, something I've carved. I'll give her a coin, just something to honour that tradition. But just for myself as well, I think it's impulse. It just feels like something that I need to do, and it would always give me something back. I always come away with a hagstone or something nice from the beach.
Yeah, that's interesting because one of our speakers yesterday, Jen, was talking about when she visits rivers, and the first time she felt like I don't want to, I'm probably explaining this, but she went to a river that she hadn't been to before and felt some kind of special connection. And then she sort of wished that she had never found a hagstone before, and she sort of wished that she could find one, and she did find one that day in that relationship with the river. So I thought that was pretty cool. Linda has her hand raised.
Oops, I don't know how to put it down. How to lower hand. Hang on. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
I know you do make God posts for groups as well. Like you've made them for AUK and others. And I was wondering whether when you make one for a group, do you put a different energy into it? So when you're making one for yourself or making one for individuals, you're focusing on the actual god or goddess you're making and the person you're making it for. But is it different when you're doing a larger piece for a group? Are you thinking of a group energy, or are you still focusing on the god or goddess you're making and then let go of that energy for them to use it in ritual?
There goes the tank again. That's a really good question. Thank you. I'm going to say no. The group energy doesn't really come into it. I think when it's a person that I've worked with and got to know over a period of time, that they will influence that piece. If it's for a group, I've got no real connection with anyone there, and it is just about God. It is a portrayal of the God, essentially.
Okay. And then, because I'm thinking of the process, because I was interested in the question that was posted earlier about the process. Are you sort of like, in your mind, are you visualizing how you are going to represent the god or goddess? Are you almost invoking that energy? Is it like a shamanic thing that you're feeling that energy within you and then putting it into the wood? and then letting go, or is it more of an artistic process that you're seeing yourself as an artist? You've got that image and you're making it, so you're transferring an energy.
It's a really interesting question to ask, because it's something I've done for so long now. I don't even think about it. I just do it. It's like if someone asks you to explain how you get out of a chair and walk, it's just like
I don't know. Depends how much wine I've had.
To actually stop and explain all of the steps within that, it's actually quite a complicated process and quite an amazing thing that happens. It differs, it changes sometimes. Like I say, I would just be walking along and I would stop in my tracks and just see a piece of wood and I'd say, wow, look at that, that's Loki in that all day long, I'm having it. And other times it's a commission that's come through, and I would just go to that place. It's Odin with his hood, it's Thor, it's whoever it is, and I will just. They're all there in the back of my mind now. I've been doing it for so long, and it's like I can just go into that little alcove and almost become them, just become immersed in their story, and that is what will then come out. And yeah, there probably are similarities in pretty much all of my Odins. Now, no two will ever be quite the same, and a lot of what comes out will be on what I've been through that relates to him recently. He might come out looking a bit more austere and wise. He might come out looking a little bit more angry, depending on the Odin that I meet when I go there. If I've had a hectic, chaotic week full of conflict, you might get a more wary Odin. Whereas if I've been chilling out here for a few days, you'll probably get more of that vibe come through.
Thank you. Thanks.
So Karina says, such a cool idea using driftwood for Ron. I'm thinking storm-felled wood for Thor, and perhaps finding cut wood for Freya might also be a nice extra touch.
Yeah.
Yep. Alem says, have you ever felt like a deity guided your hand, almost like you took a back seat and they led you to carve what they wanted?
That's a really good question. Yes, I guess so. But to me, and this is just for me, I think what they are is that they are manifestations of us. They're crystallizations of human attributes and qualities that are within all of us. So when it's a God doing it, yes, it is, but it's actually that something that's already within us that they are then just drawing out, and that's what I think Godposts do. They draw your focus. They draw the focus of one particular aspect or attribute of you that you need in that moment, I guess. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Anna asks, do you still feel energetically connected to all the works that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I love seeing them when people post pictures up years later. It brings tears to my eyes sometimes. I just love seeing them and knowing that they're out there playing a part in somebody's life in some far-flung corner of the world. It's absolutely amazing. It's so satisfying to know that.
So if somebody were to want to acquire a piece from you, or to order or special order something, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, it's really difficult. I hate saying no to people. I really, really do. But like I said, I only have so much time to do this, and it has to be enjoyable time. I can't be under relentless pressure because the love will just be gone. So I decided to launch Patreon about a year ago now. Patreon is a way to support me in what I do. Little as £1 a month. People who subscribe then have the perk of being able to commission pieces from me. It's a way for me of then just filtering who can request pieces from me, keeping the workload manageable, but also for those people to then play a part in building a bigger future. Patreon money went into part of this new structure that's gone up this summer. It helps me in upgrading my tools and trying new materials, things like this. And I'm putting little bits aside for future projects. You know, there are some things I want to do in the future. I want to release a book in the future, almost like a coffee table book with pictures of my pieces and a few words and reflections for each one. I just think it would be a nice thing to do. So there's a little bit of money going aside for publishing costs, etc. for that, as and when I find the time to do it. But yeah. So yeah, Patreon is the way to acquire pieces from me, and it's a really important part of this journey. And I know some of you on here are a part of that, and massive thank you to all of you. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to also mention, because I know that I fell into this sort of trap unintentionally, but so Chris's Patreon starts at, is it £1 a month, I believe?
Yeah.
But that's not all the money. Like, you can sign up and you can give more. So if you want to donate at a higher level, because I had asked him once, like, have you thought about doing tiers? And he was like, well, you know, yes, but not really doesn't match what I'm doing. So, but then I realized you could actually give more. So you could give as much as you want per month, basically.
Yeah, I wanted it to be affordable. I didn't want it to cost anyone. You know, I think most people can afford it. You know, so I wanted to start it at that. You know, some people give a lot more, and that's, you know, that's wonderful. But whatever people can afford really helps. You know, and yes, I did think about tiers, but I'm not really in a position to be doing free stuff. You know, the whole of this is the time to do it, and the time that I have wanted to be putting into creating these things and getting them out to people, and not you know, necessarily working on t-shirts, beanie hats, and, you know, coasters and coffee mugs, that kind of thing. It's not really me, you know. Right. So I put up some additional content there, some quite personal thoughts and reflections that I don't share anywhere else. There are some other things I've been talking to one of the guys on there recently about, perhaps a Discord channel, which is something I don't know a lot about at the moment, but he's been telling me about it, and it might be a nice little way to engage more personally. So watch this space, that might be coming soon.
Yeah, so speaking of watch the space, people can follow you, aside from a Patreon, Instagram and Facebook. So I think if they just search for you, Gungnir Godposts, I think it's Gungnir_Godposts on Instagram.
Yeah, and just Gungnir Godposts on Facebook. And
okay, yeah.
Find me. Yeah, Instagram has been a real success. You know, I started out on Facebook, did Facebook for years, and it became very sort of monetized. Every post I did, boost this post for £10, boost this post for £15, and I'm doing that, Mr. Zuckerberg. I'm sorry, you've got enough money already. So then my reach was getting very restricted. And I didn't really understand Instagram, but I knew a couple of other people doing it, so I just gave it a try, and it just went through the roof. You know, it's really kind of taken off. So Instagram, I think, for creators is definitely a really good tool.
Yeah, so I have one final question, and then I'll kind of scan the crowd for any last thoughts. And that is, I know you talked a bit about your connection with Ron, and I'm wondering, are there any other gods or goddesses that you feel particularly strongly connected with?
That's such a good question, because it changes. It has changed throughout life. I think in my teens, I first connected with Vidar, the god of nature and the god of vengeance. When I first discovered that all of these ancient gods and this big part of our culture have been sort of pushed to one side, I was angry and I wanted to bring it back. You know, as I've mellowed a bit as I've got older. I think when I became a father, almost instantaneously, the moment my son was born, I could just feel Thor just filling myself, that protective, you know, nature above anything else. As I'm getting a little bit older now, yeah, I think Odin's waiting in the wings for me there. I'm not quite there yet. A little bit of Loki more recently, I think, as my relationship with him has developed and matured and broadened. And, you know, just that awareness that, you know, sometimes thinking outside the box a little bit and, you know, being a little bit cheeky is what you need to get you through. So, yeah, it's changed and will no doubt continue to change over the years, I think.
Are there any other questions that anybody has that they didn't have a chance to ask yet, or while Chris is still here? Any last thoughts, comments, questions? So we are clear on how to connect with him. So you got the social media, Patreon, and thank you so much, Chris, for everything that you have brought to this session today. It's been a wonderful opportunity to get everybody to get to know a little bit more about you and your process, and it's been really, really wonderful.
Honestly, thank you for inviting me. It's been really good fun. I've really enjoyed it. And if anyone does have any questions, contact me on social media. I'll be very happy to discuss with you.
Thank you. Awesome. So much. So everybody, we got about 14 minutes until Sam Chilton is going to be coming on, and she's going to also be talking about her art process. So we've got two artists back to back, which is awesome. So we'll take a little bit of a short break, just about 10 minutes, and then we'll be back with Sam. And Chris, obviously, you're welcome to stick around, or if you have things to do. I know it's probably late afternoon in your area right now, right?
It's getting towards tea time. Kids are going to be hungry.
Okay, there you go. So if you need to take off, that's great too. Thank you so much again.
All right. Cheers. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.